Yo, this is the ancient Texan. The ancient Texan talking about copper supply and climate goals. I'm a metallurgical engineer, extractive metallurgical engineer. My first love was copper. My current love is magnesium. Had a few other flings along the way. We talk about, meeting climate goals, mainly getting the CO2 level down, not letting the Earth rise more than 1.5, although I think that's goal is gone, and now we're talking about uh, 2%. Well, I don't disagree with the ambition and that there's not global warming, but I don't think there's actually a plan that's viable to get us there. I don't think it's going to happen. And I have a half a dozen reasons for thinking that, but I'll just going to pick one today. And I would advocate that somebody, and I don't know who the hell it is, should get together an engineering and environmental firm and, some economists, put a team together and spend a few $1 million developing the most realistic plan. And that's not at all straightforward because a lot of the current plan depends on turning off, you know, natural gas and fossil fuels and having the earth try to operate at a deficit energy position, which, the way we got our comfortable lives is because of low cost energy. And are we going to deny that to Africa, Latin America, the places that still need to grow their energy to have a good life? I I don't actually think that's ethical. Besides, I that's just one of many problems. We're going to look at copper supply chain and climate goals. The global copper supply chain faces a critical paradox. It is essential for renewable energy technologies, yet production must triple by 2050 to meet climate goals. While current investment levels of approximately 42 billion annually fall far short of the 84 to 150 billion, and that would be annually needed yearly to close projected supply gaps. So let's just say, to keep it nice round numbers, we're doing 40 billion a year now and we need to go to 120 billion. Easy to say, but who the hell is going to do that? Here's some stuff about copper demand for clean energy. Let's just look at that part right there. The clean energy transition is driving unprecedented demand for copper. We had 25 million tons in 2020 to 50 million tons by 2050. That's 30 years, and this says double. And you'll notice that there's a lot of contradictions if you actually look at the numbers close. But the clear message is we need a lot more copper. You need 2.5 to 7 times more copper per megawatt to produce energy by solar. Okay, let's just round that up. You need 5 times as much copper to make your energy with solar versus traditional, fossil fuel plant like natural gas. Offshore wind farms need 8 to 15 tons per megawatt for cabling and generators. Electric vehicles use 53 kilograms of copper each, 2.5 times more than the conventional vehicles. This kind of depends on battery choice and a lot of other things. There's a lot of estimates that that's much higher. By 2035, the supply demand imbalance could reach, let's just call it 10 million ton deficit per year, potentially delaying the deployment of 150 gigawatts of renewables and 12 million EVs annually. About 15% of global clean energy targets per year, however. So that's not a small change. Producing copper has got some problems. Making copper increases the emissions. And if we go from today to what we need by 2050, we like 10 times the emissions from copper. Now, they're going to say here one key challenges include declining ore grades, which have dropped 40% since 1991, requiring 2.5 times more rock processing per ton of copper, and increasing energy use by 3 to 5 times. That's an underestimate. Water scarcity affects 50% of copper mines globally, with drought risk threatening production in Chile and Zambia, while geographic concentration places 85% of reserves in just 5 countries. That's a pretty bad sentence I've got there, but we'll go with it. Other problems include mining operations face a 15 to 25-year lead times from discovery to production. Some of that is studying the type of ore it is and how it's distributed, drilling a lot of holes in the ground to, map out the deposit. But a big part of that is permits. I would say most of the time you can figure out how to do it a long time before you can uh, get the permit. New projects require 7 to 10 year approval process due to environmental concerns. Well, it's environmental concerns, not in my backyard, native lands. There's a deposit right outside of Tucson. It's been waiting over 20 years for a permit. I blame that primarily on the Democrats, and we've tried to protect everybody and do due process, which I'm in general in favor of. But you can't make everybody happy if you're going to meet the climate challenges. Just not going to happen. So, so we can make the choice not to meet the energy deposits, the energy um, goals. In engineering, it's always a trade-off with between two options. You're kind of trying to optimize, and it's always trade-offs. There's never like a nice, clean, this is the way. It's balancing the pros and cons of different approaches, balancing, one way increase these kind of costs, another way causes another problem. Okay, 4 to 17 tons of water are consumed per ton of copper produced. Okay, you need 10 times as much water to make every ton of copper. A lot of emissions come from diesel powered equipment and coal coal-fired smelting. Well, most smelting is not coal-fired. Some some is. Most of it is natural gas furnaces or electric arc electric furnaces. But a lot of that electricity also comes from um, fossil fuels. Recycling can only meet 26% of the 2050 demand due to long product lifespans. In other words, you start using copper cable, use it for many decades before you recycle it. And then you got to get people to get out there and uh, collect it. And we used to have a lot. I used to work at a copper smelter, copper recycling smelter. Most of those have been put out of business by China. There's not many people left in the US that even know how to design one of those plants anymore. I think they recycle about 24%, so this is a little bit misleading. So they're going to say it's going to jump from 22, 24% copper is recycled up to 26%. So a lot of this copper is already included in the supply that we've got. Investment. Here's where you get to the nitty gritty. Okay, let's just look at that mouthful right there. Renewable energy goals requires 2 to 3 trillion. Wow, that's a lot of pocket change. With annual funds of 100 billion, currently they do 42 billion just to keep kind of the status quo. This investment gap tends to create severe supply shortages. No joke. Copper prices must potentially double to $20,000 per ton to make people want to spend trillions of dollars. It now costs 23 to 40,000 per ton of annual production to get a new plant mine up and going, mostly the mine, compared to just 4 to 5,000 per ton of annual production. That's not a small amount. A lot of that is driven by the fact that the ore grade is declining. So if you have a 0.5% ore grade, meaning that there's a 0.5% of copper in your material, and it drops to 0.25%, you now have to move double the amount of rock. Let's just think if something is 1%, you have to move 100 pounds of rock, 100 pounds of ore to get the 1 pound of copper. At 0.25%, you have to move 400 pounds of ore. And this doesn't include overburden, which might mean the ore is, in the ground somewhere and there's a band of it or, you know, of ore, and you might have to, do a half a mile of dirt on top of that ore grade, and the ore grade may, dip downward or the body of ore may dip downward or go sideways or get thinner or, you got to follow it, and that got to move a lot of dirt. get this, 80 new major mines are needed by 2050. Mines cost billions of dollars to put in. Mining companies like Teck Resources, that's up in Canada, have allocated 2 billion. Well, that's obvious I won't get it done. In Euro Copper, 200 million. It doesn't even register. So they've allocated 2 billion. What is that? One or two mines? I mean, it's nothing. And this 200,000, no, that's not going to do much. Decarbonization technologies require funding to reduce the sector's growing emission footprint, which could reach 2% of global GHG emissions without intervention. I don't actually know what GHG emissions are, but this is basically saying you need more money if you're going to produce this copper without producing more CO2 emissions, which 2%, I don't know, you'd have to ask yourself, is that additional investment worth it, or is it better off to just produce more copper and then install more green energy? Anyway, that's it. That's an optimization type thing. Here's all the um, there's a lot of project going on across the United States. Some of this, though, is a little more talk than action. 27 copper projects are advancing across the U.S., with various companies seeking private investment. Annual U.S. copper mining investment is currently in the low single digit billions, which is kind of like just keeping going what we've already got going. We need tens of billions, and we have a few billion. Streamlined permitting and continued public private partnerships are necessary to ensure domestic supply keeps pace with growing demand. I think in Canada it takes 4 years to get a mine approved. I don't know what the average is here, but it's somewhere between 10 and 20 years. So it's basically 10 times longer in the US, just like we pay more for pharmaceutical drugs. Just throw that little detail in there. So, wow. Oh, I don't even know what question to ask here next. So, I mean, we don't really want to get into the technology of copper smelting because I actually don't know the latest, and I suspect you guys don't even know the basics. So, my point in this video, and I'm going to keep it short here, is we've got all these plans to reduce CO2 emissions, and they have it all mapped to how many degrees of warming we prevent, and how all this CO2 has to be cut to save the planet, although I don't think it's an existential crisis. Could make weather worse. It could cause droughts. It could cause a lot of people to be displaced, both from rising sea and desertification. It's not one of my words. So I I get it. There's a lot of problems, but there's also a lot of things that we can adjust to when you know that you've got a long time to adjust to it. Like Japan has figured out that they have earthquakes and a lot of them. In Chile, they have earthquakes. Places that have earthquakes, California, they make their buildings stronger. If we know Miami is going to flood, we either decide we're going to move out or we start building a wall like the you know Danes have built. All those little windmill things they have, and they've got their whole country like this big wall that keeps the ocean out. Pumps, even down in New Orleans, they got all these dikes that keep uh, the Mississippi in its banks and keeps it from flooding the city. Doesn't always work. Works pretty well. You only hear about it when it doesn't work. So you can do engineering to deal with the consequences too. And I'm not sure, what's the lowest cost path, but I don't think it's existential crisis. Like how many millions of people are going to be killed? You don't even see that. And they do a lot of cheating with the numbers too. It's like that it's going to raise the temperature and kill more people because of heat exposure. But do you know that about 10 to 20 times as many people die of cold and there will be less cold deaths? They don't even bring that up. I think you should kind of subtract one from the other. And I think actually you get less deaths by temperature change. So I don't think it's existential crisis. Existential crisis is Putin, nuclear weapons. Let that be like a 10 existential crisis or an asteroid hitting us. Let's give the nuclear weapons a 9 and a big ass asteroid hitting us as a 10. And then where would you put not meeting our climate goals? Well, vary a little bit on how poorly or how good we do, but I don't know. I'd put it like a 2 to maybe 4 on an existential crisis. It's not the end of the world. Nuclear weapons, asteroids could pretty much be the end of the known world. I mean, the rats and the cockroaches would probably do fine. But what I'm getting at in this talk is we're just like assuming somehow that we can make a plan that needs a lot more copper and then just assume it will happen and even that it can happen. I don't I wonder how well this study is on projecting costs because ore grade going down, I've seen some curves on that and the costs go up exponentially. I mean, it's not a little bit. I personally don't think there's a chance in hell we're going to have enough copper to meet our global climate goals. Not even close. Just thinking it will happen and to say, I've seen estimates that we need anywhere from like 6 to 11 times as many copper mines as we are digging right now. Ooh, going to be a lot of unhappy NIMBYs around the world. I don't think you can even solve the NIMBY problem, not in my backyard problem. So I personally don't think it's going to happen. That big a change in an industry will will result in a lot of unintended consequences and barriers that aren't obvious when you start. When you start changing an industry that much, not to mention the fact that you don't have enough people that even know how to do copper mining and copper refining and stuff, it's just it's just not going to happen. So I don't think we're going to meet our climate goals. So if we're not going to meet our climate goals, then we need to start thinking about what's preparation do we need. Maybe we should start the wall in Miami and quit fooling ourselves. Anyway, there you can think through this yourself, but this is one extractive metallurgist opinion, is that we're not going to meet our copper goals. This is the ancient Texan, hoping some reality settles in on us.